Good evening and welcome to the UpSet podcast. Tonight, we are talking about highlights from the year-end meetings at the GC and the NAD. Coming up next. All right. Once again, good evening, guys. Thank you for tuning in to the UpSet podcast. We're so happy that you decided to join us. We are live this evening. And when I say we're, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this group of wonderful people right here. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Happy Sunday. Football Sunday.
Football Sunday.
I don't know. And for those of you who are watching the game and watching us, we don't mind if you put the scores in the chat every now and again. We appreciate it. But thanks for hanging out with us.
Last time I checked, it was Cowboys 17, Eagles 14. That may have changed since then.
It's still the same. Still the same.
Wow.
Yeah, let's go Eagles.
Mm-hmm. We'll be monitoring the conditions. All right. So it's been a pretty seems like a busy week. I don't know if you guys have the same experience, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. I feel like once we get into that fall season and the days seem shorter, they also seem busier, but maybe it's just me.
I hate when daylight saving time ends. I'm sleepy. And I was like, man, is it midnight? And then it'll say 7:30 p.m. But it feels like midnight. I don't like it.
For those clocks that don't automatically change, like your cell phone and your smartwatch, some of those other things, they just automatically change. So you don't have to think about it. But it's those other time pieces you've got to change. Otherwise, it was funny this evening. I was trying to get some of the game in, and Carrie rushes in the bedroom and says, "Aren't you guys live tonight?" I said, "Yes." She said, "What? Well, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to get some of of the game." Oh, it's an out.
Get them. I gotta watch the
game. I was like, yeah. I mean, you can forget so easily, because your body clock, your circadian rhythms are different from the clock. And sometimes I wonder if it's worth it doing that, that hour shifting around. I believe there's some states that don't do it. They just keep the time the same.
I think that
was one state.
Maybe. I think it was maybe Chicago or someone that won't move. I forgot which one. I'll look it up.
Hey, let's say hi to our people out here. Hey, Miss Rita, thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I put this up earlier, but ABC, anybody but the Cowboys. Yeah.
Indiana.
Yep, Indiana.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of my feed stories, I have two. I have one that's up and one that's down. Of course, the down one is the continuing conflict over between Israel and Palestine. All I can say about that, I'm not pushing one side or the other because I don't want to make this a geopolitical statement, but we need to pray that this does not expand. Recent reports are saying that many of the other Muslim countries are starting to think about getting into this thing. And if they do, we're knocking on the door to World War III. So let's pray that the Israelis and the Palestinians can come to some kind of understanding of peace. Not to deep dive in it, but that's a matter of prayer. The other good thing is that I just want to report, if you don't already know, that Philadelphia Zoo, which is the oldest zoo in the country, has just appointed their first Black president and CEO, female.
Wow.
is heading the Philadelphia Zoo, and that, number one, that's a great achievement. But she did say that, in one of the reports they asked, well, what's your aim, now as the leader of the Philadelphia Zoo? And she said that she wants to reimagine the urban zoo, try to revitalize, going to the zoo. I mean, I went to the Philadelphia Zoo many moons ago, and it was quite an experience. I'm sure it is. It's a perfect place for taking in children and schools to learn about animals in real time. So I'm happy to report her name is, I hope I don't.
I did see the announcement.
Her name is Jo L. Mogerman, and she's the new head of the Philadelphia Zoo. So I say,
Awesome.
thumbs up to that.
And then we also have the first Black female who's running for mayor of Philadelphia.
Right.
Will be voted on Tuesday.
Mm.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's not forget
Very
to get
nice.
out there and vote Tuesday.
Yeah. Please vote, folks.
And yeah, it's so important. And sometimes these are the ones that I have to admit, I'm being honest, I forget about. Like, when you have the major elections, everyone's talking about it. It's everywhere, and yeah, and you just know you got to go to the polls. And these are the ones we let slip by sometimes, and we're like, who are the candidates? Because you see so many signs out there, and they all start to blend together after a while. So be aware, get to know your local candidates, and get out there and vote. The other thing, we are missing someone because he is celebrating a birthday over the last couple of days. So let's shout out happy birthday to our crew member Tally.
Happy birthday, Tally. 50 years old, man. That's good, man. 50 years old.
Yes, great to be 35.
Yeah.
Again and again and again.
I think while we're on, I think his cake came out. Wow.
Yeah. They're singing happy birthday to him now, wrapping it up.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Tally. Something else I was going to talk to you guys about, but I completely forgot. But I do want to give a shout out to all of our viewers and listeners out there. It's always great when we get to meet some of you in person and you share that you are watching and that you follow us regularly. We just want to say we appreciate it, and continue to let us know when you see us out there in the public. Continue to introduce yourselves, because we see each other, but we don't always get to see you. So it's good to put the faces to some of the names or the people who don't even comment in the chat. So just a shout out to all of you who continue to watch us week in and week out. So thanks again.
Yep.
All right. So you guys ready to tackle tonight's topic? Tackle?
Yeah, GP. Yeah.
Why not?
We have a guest.
So on today, we're going to be talking about the highlights from the year-end meeting from the General Conference and the North America Division. So before we bring out a special guest, I want to bring a little history to those who may need it. The SDA Church was born out of a Millerite movement in the 1840s when they were searching for a greater understanding of prophecy. So in 1844, you know this story. Some of y'all know this. They sold their possessions and they waited on Ascension Rock near Hampton, New York, waiting for the coming of Jesus Christ. They believed that he would come on October 22nd, 1844, but that great expectation would turn into a great disappointment. Over time, they kept on studying and growing in knowledge and understanding of prophecy, and this movement continued to grow. And in 1863, somebody type 1863 in the chat. 1863.
I'm just going to do it just to do it.
They were organized into a denomination. Seventh-day Adventist Church was officially organized, thank you, Patrick Graham, in 1863. And this began another level for the church. They began to go global and begin to evangelize the world as a worldwide church. Today, Seventh-day Adventists are one of the fastest Christian Protestant growing organizations. We have over 20 million members worldwide in over 200 countries. We operate the second largest parochial education system, probably after the Catholics. We operate the second largest religious-based health care network in the US. And also in the year 1985, someone typed that in the chat, 1985. Some of you all remember where you were in 1985. I was not born yet, but some of you were. 1985, the North American Division was formed. So 1863, the GC was organized. 1985, the North American Division was formed, and it represents over 1 million people in the United States, Canada, Bermuda, Guam, and Micronesia. The General Conference is based in Silver Springs, Maryland. The North American Division is based in Columbia, Maryland. And like every organization, the GC and NAD have a year-end meeting where they report on their successes, their struggles, their failures. Actually, we don't have any failures. We're perfect. And talk about how to improve into the next year. That was a joke. I'm sorry. Forgive my pettiness. Today, we're going to be highlighting some of those top 10 moments from those year-end meetings at the GC or NAD. And so we want you all to chime in the chat, share the link with someone else, because we're going to have a wonderful and relevant discussion about the state of our church from the GC and NAD perspective. And so today we have a special guest. He is no stranger to the UpSet podcast. And so let's give a warm welcome to Pastor Keith Goodman.
Pastor!
Hey, Keith.
Pastor Dr. Goodman, God bless.
Hello. How y'all doing?
Man, doing great. We're doing better now that you're here.
Pat, was that a laugh track? What was that?
I don't know. It's a little applause.
Was that an applause?
Yeah.
I was wondering if I had.
Or is it static?
I heard static too, Chuck.
So for anyone who is living under a rock who does not know who Pastor Keith Goodman is, would you please introduce yourself to them, sir?
Well, Pastor Keith Goodman currently pastors in the Allegheny West Conference, the sister of the Allegheny East Conference, at the Ephesus Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're 112 years old, lifting up the banner of Prince Emmanuel. But I started my ministry right there in Allegheny East Conference. So always remains home to me.
Home. Yes.
All right. And
Good
so
news.
A little story about each one of you that I won't tell, but I mean,
Where's that remove button? Okay. All right.
We got some folks in the chat saying hello. Stephanie Payne, Miguel.
Hey, eldest.
You guys.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask this question specifically to Pastor Keith Goodman. So let's start with the North American Division, their year-end meetings. Who normally attends those meetings?
So there are about 306 of us in that room. And you already stated it's all of the North American Division, the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada, Bermuda, Guam, and Micronesia. The bulk of the people that serve on this committee are at the union level. They are union presidents, union treasurers, union secretaries, and then all of the conference presidents. In addition to that, there are certain invitees. They have intentionally invited some young people to serve. We had a prayer coordinator who was a younger person. In fact, she's at the University of Michigan, still in school. And so they intentionally do that. And then others are pastors like myself and Pastor Joey O from the Southeastern California Conference and several others. But it's the lion's share of the people at this meeting are union personnel. So it's
awesome.
Kind of because it's the division, the next lower level are the ones who are the primary voices in that room.
Got it. And they select a few delegates from the conference level, it sounds like.
A few, right.
Okay.
So
the special people.
Even my election, Pastor Dr. Pete Palmer and my president agreed on me being the pastoral representative from the union. So I'm not representing just Allegheny West Conference. I'm sitting on this committee as a pastoral representative for our union. So I'm representing Potomac and Allegheny East and Allegheny West, but there are lay members that are representing, like Orland John, I think is his name. He's a lay member from Allegheny East, but again, it's a union representation at that level.
That's an awesome opportunity.
It
Thank you for
is.
breaking that down for us.
It really is. Mhm.
And I'm curious, did they cover your travel and expenses and lodging, or did you have to come out of pocket to go to that meeting?
I'm sure that my treasurer has access to this. And so I appreciate the fact that my treasurer has graciously consented to reimburse me for my expenses.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you for representing us. I wanted to ask, a lot of times when people get invited to be delegates, it's not always met with, wow, I was chosen among the small few. Sometimes people kind of are like, oh, another meeting. What was your mindset going in? Did you see this as an opportunity? Were you curious? Have you been to one before? Is this your first time being a delegate?
This is my third year serving on this.
Oh, okay.
Now I must confess that I am probably strange in this way. My brother-in-law Pucky and I actually kind of enjoy these meetings, and it's because you get to understand where the levers are. All right. So when you're trying to see change, one of the things that you want to know is, well, how do they change? And so by serving at this level, I've gotten a better sense of, okay, this is how remuneration gets changed at the church. It doesn't get changed at the local conference level. It doesn't get changed at the union level. But the people at the union level are the ones who have a voice and a vote to change remuneration policies for our educational system with our 77,000 kids in it, for our pastors, so it's an understanding. And my third year is where I feel like I've gotten a sense of how it works.
Okay.
First year, I couldn't figure out what was happening, but by this third year, I'm like, okay, so really, you will never see me at the mic because I now understand. I'm not saying I'll never go to the mic, but what I figured out is my brother-in-law talks about power up, power down dynamics, that the people at the mic are the union people.
Okay.
And if you can push your idea to one of them who goes to the mic,
they speak on behalf.
It will carry more weight than if, as a pastor, I go to the mic.
Keith, is it intentional, or is there some formula, or is there some real purpose in not having what I can perceive as not as many members there as delegates? Is there some reasoning or some calculus around that? Why there aren't as many members, or are there enough member delegates?
There are plenty of member delegates. It is not like a conference where they're trying to strike that balance of half and half. And that is because it's setting policy for the church at the level where administrators in local conferences have to do what's set at this level. So what they need is the voices in the room who are, for example, in August of 2024, to the pastors and church workers on here, you can be encouraged. You're going to get another 5% cost of living adjustment.
Hallelujah.
Amen. So that got voted at this level. Now, the reason why members are on there, but not so many, is because it is conference presidents who have to figure out now, how do we implement what was just voted at this level? And they're very often at the mic, some of the ones in some of the smaller conferences who are saying, if we do this, the implications are that we might have to let some pastors go because we have to be within a range, right? If the policy is made at the North American division, they can't just thumb their noses at it. They've got to at least be within a range. Usually the policies are written to say up to, or there's usually some range given to them. But members who don't understand the budgets and the local policies would have a harder time weighing in. They're there. They are there. There are several. In fact, there are more members from the Columbia Union than there are pastors like me. Now, there are more church workers there from the Columbia Union than there are pastors. But I'm saying the members, the lay members, actually outnumber the pastors from our union. But those people at the union level outnumber the lay people. And I think that that balance makes sense because it's heavily policy driven. So they want people who are weighing in on the discussion to understand policies and the implications on the rest of the church.
Right. Oh, okay. Cool stuff.
So one of the issues that came up at the North American Division, we want to ask you to chime in on this topic, is the shortage of pastors, the number of pastors who are available, who are eligible to retire, and the shortage of students in the pipeline to enter the workforce to replace those who can retire. Can you kind of elaborate on that discussion at the North American Division meeting?
Yes. Dr. Ivan Williams, who was ministerial, he is now, we just elected him as the vice president of strategy for the division, which I think is just great because he is a strategic thinker. And he's also a member of the Allegheny East Conference. He's a member of the Brinklow Church. But they presented on that. And if you got a chance to see it, they kind of made the case for when our boomer pastors step off the scene within the next few years, there's going to be a need. It's a need that they've been trying to address over the years. Dr. Brenda Billinger was a part of it in trying to include our women in ministry, and even to the point where they were heavily subsidizing the salaries if conferences would actually hire them to try to close the gap. But that hasn't necessarily solved the problem. And as they pointed out, that we have less students entering into the theology programs in all of our 11 colleges and universities. So the problems on the bottom side and the problems on the top side. What they were trying to do, we've been studying this, it was an issue last year. And so it's right now in the hands of a remuneration committee. And we hope that in our spring Zoom meeting, it's a virtual meeting, we won't come together physically like we do at the end of the year, to be able to see if they've been able to massage this to try to address some issues around that. One of the things that we talked about, we have breakout groups that happen a couple of the days. So the division meets and receives a lot of reports, but then we have breakout groups by the unions. So my union, of course, is Columbia Union. We discussed some of the recommendations that came to us, and one of them was salary. And that is something that they're going to try to address. But one of the things I was saying, and this is not official, so like you do on a radio program, the opinions of Keith Goodman do not necessarily reflect the views of the Columbia Union. One of the things that I was saying in our breakout group was that we're looking at the problem from the bottom and the top, but what we're missing is the middle. We're missing the middle, which is people my age and Pastor Patrick Graham's age, and something of Pastor DP's age. He's not quite there. But and I won't name them because I haven't had their permission, but when I look at the number of pastors that were in school with me, who have gone to seminary, who have been ordained, and that are saying deuces. That's a real issue, because what's happening is you don't have enough people entering in. You've got the ones who are leaving because they're either leaving and going up, and I use that in quotes, but when they leave active pastoring and become administrators in the union, in the conference, and that kind of thing, we lose them to the churches. But that middle are the people who you've invested in, and really they're becoming your senior ministers. And so I can think of 2 pastors in Central States that left from Colorado. I think of one that's in Florida, several that have left Allegheny East Conference. I mean, it's it's a serious number of pastors who have left, and mind you, not over scandal.
Right.
Not over,
Yeah.
you used to say the tithes and the thighs. They're not, that's not the reason they left. They left for
Say that
other
again. Say that again. What was that? What's that again?
money or the honey. You know what I mean? They left.
Okay.
And really we need to study that too, not just trying to attract them. But one of the things we talked about for trying to attract them was that pastors like us who are in it would be intentional about trying to encourage young ones in our school system to consider ministry.
Right.
Yeah.
For us to speak well of it. Go ahead.
Pastor Goodman, I like the question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marlene.
Sorry, Chuck. I like the question that Michelle just spoke about the lay pastors, because
I didn't see it. Please
I think
tell
the
me.
majority, at least the ones I know, are educated with MDiv degrees. They're hireable. There are a lot of people also who have been interviewed, no calls, and they're having to obtain other professions because they were. I'm glad you didn't fall, buddy, because Pat was ready to laugh. And that would have been terrible. But
I would have said that was unintentionally.
That would have really made YouTube. I mean,
we go viral. We actually needed that, Keith.
And they're your friends. It's terrible. It's terrible how they were just about to bust out laughing at you.
I should have turned my camera off when I plugged it in. I realized that my battery light came on. I said, "Oh, I better plug in."
Sorry. Yeah, next time, just cut the whole thing. Go right to it, because I thought I was going to see a pair of shoes in the air. That's why.
Yeah.
But yeah, so lay pastors and then pastors who haven't been hired, they're just out there having to grab other professions because they did graduate, but they're not being called. Are you guys considering them?
That did come up in the discussion, and I think it's something, sometimes in our delay to address things get to such a problem that the things that we've not really given serious consideration to actually become the solution. And I really believe that that's what is going to begin to fill some of the gaps. I have almost no doubt, because I don't think that we're going to get to the point where, and I want to say this very carefully, it's very difficult. Imagine a senator voting against the increase in his salary.
Right.
So when some of the lay members, like you talked about, Chuck, speak up in some of these meetings and say, well, how about we get rid of one of these levels? Or how about we have less people serving in some of these offices? It's always respectfully considered. And, the words like noted, those come up. But it's hard for the higher levels of the church to see how they can work if they really dismantle too much of who they are. And when you sit at the meetings, you can see why it's hard for them to imagine that, because they are turning out great stuff. If you watch these presentations, you're going to see the reports of our 7 media ministries and of our Christian record services for the blind and so many different things that they're doing really good work. And they have been cutting back. One of the presentations that Randy, who just left as our treasurer, pointed out was that nearly 79 to 80% comes back to a conference directly or indirectly. So where we usually think there's 65% that the conference keeps, and then it's sent up. When you look at how they break it down, and I hate to use this, but it trickles down. Another 15% trickles down. So like this year, there's a regional conference reversion, and significant funds are going to go back to 3 of our conferences for evangelism. So it goes up, and then it comes back down in different ways. There are different things that we do for refugees, right? Some significant funds that are special assistance funds, that it would be hard for the will of a local conference to keep voting away those amounts. So when they go up to that level, a chunk can come down for regional conference reversions and for master's degrees for dentists and things like that. So it's one of those things where it's hard for them to vote to make themselves smaller. And so I'm saying that some of the hard decisions that need to be made, that's a long way around to this lay pastors thing, they don't always get made so quickly. We just voted the doctrine of discovery against the doctrine of discovery, which affects First Nations and Native Americans, where if we found the land, it's ours. Well, we as a church took a bold stand, but that was 5 years in the making. What I'm saying is that a lot of the decisions that we know we need to make, the labyrinthine, bureaucratic processes make it hard to just pivot quickly. But if we don't pivot quick enough, what's going to happen is we're going to have these vacancies. And guess what? Those lay pastors are going to be right there, ready to step in when it happens.
I want to ask you, Keith, in looking at this from several different angles, in your breakout groups or at any point, was there a need for us to look at how the church is trending overall? This is the church in 2023. This is not the church of 1975, 1980, 1960. Society was very different then. Was there any discussion at all about trends? And was there a move to do at least observational studies of how our church membership and potential members are trending with society? And could that influence, well, I should say, could that also affect pastors and their thoughts of this being a career that they want to have for the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
A lot of the retiring ministers had a different level of commitment because they entered the ministry at a different time, in this world's history. Knowing how things are now, was there a discussion about someone needing to study trends so that we can kind of stay ahead of some issues instead of, proact instead of react?
Yes, it came up in presentations. Dr. Williams, who was a Seventh-day Adventist out of Harvard, very brilliant presentation, probably one of my favorite presentations. He talked to some of the data that points to what's happening, particularly among Blacks and Latinos, as opposed to whites and Asians, and the effect that just where you live has. So those were some kind of trends. There's also another department, and they didn't spend a lot of time, but there's a department that deals with data. Brilliant stuff that came out, but it just was one of those things where it was a quick report, and I was sitting there thinking, man, I wish that they had done this on Friday or Sunday instead of at the end of a day. But I think it's because we're not used to being driven by data. We're driven by narrative, and we like story, and that's not a bad thing. Jesus told stories, so I don't want to make that. But sometimes our stories are only based on our reference point, because so many of our leaders are in their 60s and up. Their stories shape the direction of the agenda, but there were voices. In fact, there was one young lady from a lay member from Canada who asked, she said, how about we do a SWOT analysis of the church? She was like, how about we, do some research and try to come. And, the response was, the church is 160 years old and it's not easy but we're trying to address these things. And I think that the response was well-intentioned. Let me say that, I really do. But I also think that we probably do need to do a little bit more studying to see where we really are.
I think that's so important. If we are to expect growth, we need to recognize, in my opinion, that the language of the church today should be for today, not yesterday. And when I say language, I mean, sociological angles in which we approach the general public, the way in which we do evangelism. Is it, is the language trending more to today than yesterday? Because there's some people who are turned off from certain kinds of language when we talk about evangelism and outreach, so forth and so on. And I'm just concerned that we may not be on top of our game in terms of seeing how society has trended. Digital evangelism already has made a major change in the way in which we reach people, and in the ways that they respond. All the social networks. It's a different ball game out there now. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if the church as an institution has adjusted its language to meet society today in general.
I want to kind of add to that, because the more I hear you talk about that, Charles, and the more we hear about the data and all of the things that we're hearing, sometimes it makes me wonder if we really want to change. Or if we want to just look like we're being progressive. Because, even as Keith was saying, if it takes 5 years, if you vote something or present something and it takes 5 years for it to actually be implemented, to me, sometimes that's an intentional lag, or the system is set up in a way where change doesn't happen quickly because change is not really what we want. And, I remember when I first started working for the conference, and I heard, I think it was some type of survey, and it came back that there were some church members who said they did not want their church to grow. They said they wanted to keep the membership. And I thought that was so appalling. Like, how could that? But they weren't the only ones. They were not an anomaly. There were several churches who felt that way. And so if a local church can feel like, I don't want my congregation to grow, is it possible that somewhere in the big...
Well, I want to be fair. I think that they do want to make change. It's just, it's the balance of leading this institution and not wanting. So there are a lot of factors. Let me be careful. Lord, help me to be careful.
Yeah.
Elder Bryant is the second African-American president of this division. And if you sit in that room, or if you listen closely online, you're going to realize that the church is a reflection of America. The church in North America is a reflection of America.
Very much so.
There are very conservative elements theologically, and there are very conservative elements politically in that room. Right. There's large, there's small, there's big city, there's rural. And so there's
prejudice.
There's prejudice, right? You said that. I just quoted.
Yeah.
Is that so? That makes you move slow. It just makes you move slow because
I'm sorry, Keith. It's slow, careful.
Careful, yeah. It makes you move very carefully. So what he's doing is he's trying to move, and like there are things that I know he wants to do, but it's kind of hard because the system, remember, it's NAD union, it's union conferences. So you can't move a union if that union president who wants to be reelected is going to make a decision that all of his conference presidents don't want to make. And so this political thing and all of that, it moves slowly. That doctrine of discovery is a no-brainer for us as African Americans, right? But when you learn that some of the people own property that's passed down to them that may
come from indigenous resources.
Exactly. Yep. You realize that it's not as easy to snap your fingers. So I think they do want,
and it's not 1 and 2 acres, by the way.
Oh no. It's not 40 acres. Okay.
That's right.
But what I'm saying to you is that I think they do want to change, but it's just hard to just make those decisions quickly. So things just keep getting processed and the can keeps getting kicked down the road until finally a decision gets made. And like it took 4 or 5 years to make it, but it finally did get made. And there was pushback on the decision that was finally made.
I want to ask you, I don't know if you could just answer this quickly, but as a delegate, did you leave the year-end meetings confident, encouraged, or questionable? I mean, what was your feeling leaving? Like, yeah, we got this done, or we're on the right track, or we're going in the right direction, or not?
What is that phrase they often use? I am cautiously optimistic.
I see. Okay.
No, honestly, I'm more hopeful after my third year than I was in my first and second years because I understand it a little bit better. And now I'm realizing that there's more work that needs to happen behind the scenes, that we have to push the people who do have the weight when they go to the mic to go to the mic on the things that we need them to go to the mic on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's so now that I understand it, before I'm like, I remember writing Elder On, who's the secretary. I said, how do I get something on this agenda? And he kind of, didn't say directly, but he was basically letting me know you can't get anything on the agenda because it has to go through those chains. And if you understand that, then right now is the time. If there's something that we really care about that we want on next year's agenda, like right now in the next couple of months is the time to be trying to get that thing to get up the chain. So I'm saying I'm more hopeful now because I'm like, oh, I'm kind of understanding how to get something there. And if the right people make the decision before the meeting, the likelihood of it getting to be considered is greater.
Well, we're going to take a moment now to.
Your face looks like, I don't really like that answer.
Yeah. No, thank you for your honesty, Pastor Goodman. We're going to take a moment and just acknowledge a few of the questions in the chat. We're going to start with Carrie Williams. Was the budget for hiring discussed?
What do you mean by budget?
Hiring pastors. Was there any numbers thrown out for like money set aside to recruit or hire pastors discussed?
So, that there are, each level of the church has total autonomy over certain things. So GC policy, which is why the NAD couldn't say we're ordaining women without the world church agreeing, because policy is set at a level above us. NAD has its responsibilities. Local unions have their responsibilities. The number of pastors that are hired is totally in the hand of the local conferences based upon their budgets. So what the local conferences have to do is the number of pastors they can hire is based upon the salary rate that's set at the North American division. That's why they run to the mic and say, oh my goodness, if you vote this raise, then if my tithe doesn't go up, that means I'm going to have to lay some people off because I'm locked into paying them at this rate. But they don't have anything to do with how many pastors get hired.
Were there any discussions about career transitions for older people who are in other fields? I understood the talk about the young and, increasing the pipeline to enter the pastoral ministry. But what about people who may be spirit-filled and may be willing to go into the field? Is there any transitional process that was discussed?
No, what was discussed was to talk about how to do that.
Okay.
So what came up was that there were other people. So we talked about, like, what was brought up, lay people. And then there was the discussion about people from the Philippines and from, so there are a lot of pastors around the world that would be willing to come and work here. But how do you do that with immigration and green cards and all of that kind of thing? So that's going to be studied some more, because we're in this place where we're going to need more pastors. They're kind of studying, how do we do this? How do we get people from different areas? Of course, you have that master's that they do through the extension at Washington Adventist University, but most of those are already pastoring. So we're not getting a lot of new pastors who come through that. It's more, you're in, and now we want to sharpen the tool that you're using, but you're already in. So there is thought and talk about that, but it's not at the point where we made any vote on anything.
All right. We're going to go one more question from Olive Harvey. She asks, is there a reason conferences don't hire pastors that study theology at non-Adventist colleges or institutions?
Now, I'm going to answer that question, but not because it came up during our discussion.
Sure.
But you gave a short history on the Seventh-day Adventist Church's beginnings. The first conference that we had was the Michigan Conference. And as you pointed out, it wasn't until 1863 that we actually incorporated to become, because there was a resistance to that. We didn't want to settle. We were a movement. I know Patrick Graham has talked about that a lot. So there was a resistance to becoming settled, but it became necessary for two reasons: for holding property and for saying, this is one of ours. This pastor is preaching this message about this movement. So there's we do have pastors that have graduated from universities that are not Seventh-day Adventists, and many of those who get doctorates, all of them don't go to Andrews. Many of them go to Claremont and other schools right here in Ohio, United. So what it is that at the level of training and doctrine, there's a concern that the people we will ordain will be us, will be preachers who preach and blow the trumpet with a certain sound. A clear understanding of our historicist theology and a way of interpreting prophecy, that balance of not once saved, always saved, but understanding those saved by grace through faith, faith without works is dead. So that's kind of why we don't do a whole lot of just grabbing pastors from anywhere. And I don't mean that to put anybody down, but Seventh-day Adventists really want the people who are preaching in our churches and in our pulpits to understand who we are. And that's taught at the undergrad level, and it's really drilled into us at the seminary. And we have one seminary for that reason as well. Right. And all the seminaries are still really tied into our one seminary, because we want to make sure that if you're going to be one of ours, you understand the 5 S's,
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for answering those questions from our chat. We invite you all to continue to engage with us. I see some awesome comments from Gamal and Yvette. Keep on chiming in on the conversation. So a question for the panel and for Pastor Goodman: why should members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church even care about what the GC or NAD is doing? Some of us are, quite frankly, tired of the organizational machine and structure. We're tired of the pace of progress. And some of the young people are, they're just like, forget it. Like, I love Jesus. I believe in the Sabbath, but the whole institution thing, miss me with that. And so what can we do to foster more interest and more understanding about the levels and how our organization works and moves?
I think
panel, so I'm going to wait.
No, I was going to say, I think, Keith, you addressed that a little bit, even with your own experience. Your first year, you're coming in, you're kind of observing, you're learning how the machine works, and you see how change can happen. You came in, a lot of times we get impatient with wanting change, quickly, but it's important for you to understand how it works so that you can get the change that you want to see. Like, particularly our young people, they want to see the change. They get frustrated by the process, but you have to take the time to learn how you get the change in place. And I think it's important for people to be interested in this, because just from hearing what Keith shared, I can see why it's important to be in the room. Because now you become aware with the people who can speak on your behalf, and you know how to build those relationships to kind of, I hate to say it, to get your agenda on the table. And so it's important to be involved if you want to see change that we say we want to see. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, there's a quote that says, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu.
Right. Is there, or did you notice, or do you think there is any indication of lobbying going on? When we talk about the church paralleling society, I mean, we vote for representatives. Representatives go to Washington, in theory, to represent our interests. But in between the the representatives are lobbyists. And sometimes those interests are filtered or even created by lobbyists or lobbying. And so the person in the pew doesn't see the change because there's something blocking the change or steering it in a different direction. Does that, my question make sense on that in terms of the lobbying process?
I would say that I can't say that I see any evidence of lobbying. I do think that there are conversations that happen among major players. That's pretty evident. But I don't know that there's lobbying. I suspect that there could be. I mean, there are obviously some very powerful elements in our church. I mean, you think about ASI, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's any lobbying, but I'm saying there are some very wealthy members of our Seventh-day Adventist church. And then you've got, some conferences. We've got churches that have more. We've got one church that has more heft than an entire conference in terms of number of pastors and its tithe. There's one church in North America. So I'm saying I don't know that it would necessarily be called lobbying, but if the pastor of that church were to call somebody, maybe they would take his call. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know that I can say that I've seen lobbying, but I do think that it's clear that because everything's not even
influence,
there's a little more influence in some places than there is in others.
That's fair.
I see Taliaferro chiming in the chat, talking about
tell him it's
making an appearance because he's not here. I don't know if that's true or not. Can you confirm or deny, Pastor Goodman?
He's a mess.
Yes, he's absolutely correct. No, I'm just kidding.
That's true because he wasn't on here the last time you were here, Keith.
Yeah, well, that's him running for me. No, I'm just kidding.
Tell him you are his replacement.
Happy birthday, sir.
I know, right?
Happy 77th birthday.
77.
Oh, mercy.
But back to the question that Latasha was answering. I do believe that when you study anything, whether it's civil politics or church politics, you put yourself at an advantage. And what was his name? The late John. He was from Georgia. He wrote a book. John Lewis.
Yeah. Okay.
He had the head injury. He wrote a powerful book, and he talked about that with young people. That really you need to understand the thing. I would say to younger people in our church, you're probably not going to find another church that you're as comfortable in as the Seventh-day Adventist church. This thing is very hard for you to shake. When you grow up eating a certain way, you grow up believing in the Sabbath, you grow up with the connections that Pathfinders brings, you grow up with camp meetings, you grow up going to Christian school, and it's hard to find that anywhere else. There's a very strong culture. So I'm saying, the late Howard Thurman wrote a book, A Man Not at Home Somewhere is Not at Home Anywhere. And so I'm the guy who has chosen to make this my home. But because it's my home, I also want to make it better. And that means that you need to understand how it works. And I would say to all the young people, this church was founded by young people, right? It has somehow gotten hijacked by older people. But if the younger people would actually study it, and that means it's got to go beyond a quick social media reaction, it means you've got to show up at your local church business meeting. So that when it comes time for them to select somebody to serve on the conference nominating committee, you will be considered. And when you are at that level and you show up there, then you get considered for the union things. There's an Avery who was a young guy from the North Philadelphia church who was serving as a young man on the union committee. because he had just been around. He was well spoken. He was educated. You know what I mean? He was trusted. People, I think that the older members of this church are actually at this time more so than ever before looking for young people who actually are genuinely interested. I would say to young people right now, this is probably a better time than it was 10 years ago, because right now they're looking at the fact that I'm 65, I'm 67, I'm 70 years old. At some point, I got to pass off the scene. And while I held on to power too long, they're desperate for young people who actually care for the church. So I think that young people, now is not the time to leave. Now is your time that you can come in, and we'll go on back to when Charles Bradford was in the office in his late 20s and early 30s, when Dudley was in early enough. I think that the pendulum is going to swing all the way around. We're going to see very young, competent leaders. If they stay in, if they care, if they learn, I don't want to say how to play the game, but if they understand how it works, if their hearts are in the right place, you know what I mean? I think God can tap some younger leaders. Pat and I are aging out in another 7 or 8 years.
No, you guys have another 30 years in your tank.
To advise.
To advise.
I want to say just an observational study. I think a lot of challenging young people are some of those same young people who have a rich Adventist base at the core, but the periphery, the outside of that core, they are having to deal with the realities of today. And then they question the church. This is where the question comes. Are we trending? Are we moving? Are we making our message relevant for 2023? And I would dare say that there are some potential young pastors who walk away because they feel that these are pastors that may be first, second, third generation Adventists that are clearly recognizing that today the church is not trending properly. And so they feel constrained and they feel like they can't do what they feel is relevant for today. And if so, they walk away.
Yeah. And it's to our loss. Okay. I agree that they're frustrated and feeling, and I think rightly so, that they have more autonomy. When they leave, it's up to you to make a go of whatever ministry idea you have, and you don't have to wait on a conference president or an executive committee or anybody. I'm just saying, I still think it's to our loss. And I think that what we ought to do is keep pushing to try to make room for some of these innovative young minds to be able to spread their wings. I think that conferences, local conferences, ought to decide whether it's 3% of their budget. You know what I mean? We're going to squeeze out 3% of our budget for something innovative, right? We're going to keep the 97% to keep the lights on and all that other stuff. Squeeze out 3% and let some of it fail. But when some of those things actually succeed, then say, you know what? Let's spend 5% on the things that worked.
Right.
And just keep investing in innovation. Strangely enough, this Dr. Williams inspired me to read Ministry of Healing. And so I'm actually 2/3 of the way through Ministry of Healing. And as I'm reading it, I'm realizing how innovative we were. I mean, Ellen White, even her statements on dress, she talks against things that are gaudy. So in our day, I guess it would be wearing flashy neon green and silver kind of stuff to church to preach in. But she was also very clear that we ought to invest in quality, right? Very often we just look for the statements that talk against spending money on jewelry, not 1 penny on a circlet of gold and all that kind of stuff. But they innovated. They spent money on the printing press. That stuff was not cheap, but they spent money. They invested in property that today is worth millions of dollars. They made the investment. And I think that we could turn this thing if we had some leaders in our conferences who said, you know what? I know what you want to do. And you can go out and do it on your own. And just like Jesus said, he's not against me, he's with me. I'm going to leave you alone. I'm not going to talk against you. I believe that God can bless you out there. but I also think that you're valuable in here. And we're willing to challenge our executive committees to say, let's set something aside in our budgets so that we can invest in some of these innovative minds so they can at least try stuff within the church and that the church can benefit. Let's face it, Breath of Life was innovative.
Yep.
Right? It was, man, listening to those old albums of artists.
Yep.
I know we play it as background music now in our churches, but back in the day, it was
yeah.
And I'm saying we've never got to let go of the fact that innovation and creativity is a thing that comes from God, and we ought to be intentionally investing in that too. And I think that if the young people saw that, some of them would hang in there. I think some would still leave, and I think there's room for that. And I don't think we ought to speak against people who feel like I need to do this thing, and I'm not willing to wait. That's okay. That's okay too.
Let me ask you something. I noticed in some of the write-up of, or at least the synopsis of the meetings, this Dr. David Williams that you referenced from Harvard David Williams, right? From Harvard University. He, it says in this write-up that he made, his focus was on a contemporary context using the lens of health. Okay, so I thought that was interesting because it sounded like he was focusing on a stronger urban ministry and this focus on health. Exactly how did he tie that together in his presentation?
As I said, I've never been terribly interested in reading Ministry of Healing through from page 0 all the way to the end. But because of the way he presented it, it was absolutely on health. And I can probably make it easy for you. If you think of the fact that once certain drugs hit certain populations in America, it moves from being seen as criminal to being seen as a public health crisis.
Right.
True.
It is in that vein that he was talking about health. He was talking about the fact that, okay, when we look at certain populations, there are certain predictable outcomes based upon the fact that they live in certain places where, like when I pastored in Chester, there was the Wade dumping site, right? It was a big EPA thing, and they had these brown, fields and all this stuff. Well, that's health. That's where he's coming from. When they don't have nutritional food or access, when they live in food deserts, that's health. So what he was pointing out with the Ministry of Healing and what we were doing in the early days of the church with Kellogg and all this is that even in the cities like Chicago, they had farms outside the city. So they were able to bring nutritious food from the farms that we had. They were able to use property to build housing for homeless people. So his thing about health was not the traditional thing that we're always talking about. You just got to get off meat and cheese. He was looking from a much bigger, broader perspective. And it made me say, oh, I need to look at this again. So that's what he was talking about, health. He wasn't just talking about, getting rid of flesh foods. Although I do think that, let me be clear to all the people watching, the original diet is a better diet. But that wasn't his sole focus.
And someone was asking if the presentation is available on YouTube. I know
They are. I don't know how long they'll be up, but if you go to Facebook, go to the North American Division Facebook page, and they also have a YouTube page. And I would recommend Dr. Hart's presentation, his devotional. I would recommend Dr. Williams' presentation. I would recommend Dr. Barry Black's devotional.
Okay.
All excellent. I mean, it's hours and hours, so I know people can't watch all of it, but Dr. Barry Black's presentation was absolutely inspirational. And I did what Dr. Hart was doing was very good too.
And I did put the link in the chat to the NAD's page that has all the videos on it. If you just want to go there and browse. So that link should be there in the chat. All right. GP,
Well, before we wrap up, I know we didn't talk much about the General Conference, but I guess we should at least acknowledge the General Conference in some way, shape, or form.
They also
So,
had their meetings.
yes.
So the General Conference, we're a division of them, and that's a separate committee. So I'm not on the committee, but of course, several of their officers are invitees to our meeting. And Dwayne Esmond came and made a very inspiring presentation talking about us going back to the altar. If I would encourage you to watch that as well. He's kind of talking about how our technology has kind of taken over and how we need to make sure that it's not controlling us, but we're using it. And so very, very good presentation to encourage families to reestablish the family altar. They also, of course, have total member involvement and have turned out some really, really good guides for churches to use. This is something they've put out.
Church
and I would encourage you to check it out. It's a lot of resources to help just practically to do evangelism, and they use basically the harvest, which is getting ready, preparing, planting, cultivating, harvesting, and preserving, and very good. I mean, very, very good. So we stayed away from the controversial discussions about different things and our differences, but those were two things that came from the General Conference that I would say absolutely go for the global total member involvement, church planners. It's a free download to any church, any pastor, personal ministries, leaders, so we can, be about our Father's business. And then the Back to the Altar that Dwayne Esmond, who's from the White Estate, that's there at the General Conference, was very, very good.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those resources. And before we land the plane, we want to give opportunity for any of our upsetters or you, Pastor Goodman, to leave some final words to encourage our church members who may be listening or watching.
Shall I wait for the upsetters?
Well, I don't know if what I have to say is encouraging, but I think we need to address some of these tough issues, and I don't know if they were addressed, like women's ordination, gender differences, LBT, all the letters.
TQIA plus.
Yeah. I know, maybe these aren't, the main focuses of the church, but they are increasingly trending as an issue in our church. And I just hope that we are dealing with that in a healthy way. Full stop.
Yeah, I just want to say to everyone to get involved. If you don't know something, read, research. The information is there. I believe you can go to the website on the North American Division and GC, and they at least share a report of a summary of what happened at these meetings, right? And so if you don't want to waste 25 hours of your time watching the whole session.
Not a waste.
We all aren't able, Elder. We all aren't. But at least research, find out what's going on, and do what you can to get involved at your local level. As Pastor Goodman mentioned, it begins with the local level.
Can you guys hear me? I feel frozen. I mean, I can't. Can you guys
hear
me?
You are frozen.
You're not moving. You are frozen.
I don't know what's happening. Okay. Well, at least you can hear me. I wanted to say that I really appreciate.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh. Well, Pastor Goodman, Mrs. Barrios wanted you to give those resources again. Pastor Dwayne Esmond and the other resource from the General Conference.
Yes. Back to the Altar. That's the Ellen White Estate. Dwayne Esmond is there. He's also a member of Allegheny East Conference. But then the other one was Global Total Member Involvement. And when you go to that, you're going to see lots of links. I mean, resources on how to help members give Bible studies. I mean, where
can we get that? Where Advent Source maybe? Can we go?
You can get it right on the website. Man, I wish that I had
on the website. Okay.
Yeah, there's a QR code on here, and I don't know whether or not it would work.
Mm-hmm.
Does that?
We see the QR code. Yeah.
Is there any way to snap that? I don't know, but
well, it's been recorded, but
so there you go.
I'm sure we can. Some people just want to know a quick way to get it, maybe a digital version of it.
Well, that QR code will take you to it, and yes, this is a nice slick 4-color, but that's the same thing that you can access through the GC website. It's under Sabbath School and Personal Ministries if they're gonna search for it. Okay. But the only thing that I would say is what has already been said: get involved, stay involved. Don't allow yourself to be too easily discouraged. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And I know we hate to say it, but even in the church, the enemy is trying to keep things from progressing. And if you can use discouragement to make people say, forget it, all of those powerful voices are what he wants to see go away. So study it and realize that every loss is a lesson. And it doesn't mean that you need to quit. It just means you need to come back at it a different way. The other thing I would say is what I've left this year with an overwhelming sense of, we have so many high quality resources that are not getting to the local church. I'm talking about Elizabeth Talbot and It Is Written and what Snell is doing. And I mean, it's like, there's this thing called Adventist Learning Community. Y'all, type in Adventist Learning Community. And if you're trying to start a small group and don't have resources, you'll be going for years and years with fresh content. I'm saying there's just so much stuff out there, because with every one of our 7 media centers, which Adventist Learning Community is not a part of, they have podcasts, they have downloads. And then you've got Advent Source, and you've got, I'm saying there's a lot out there that can help us with our ministries. But because the people who attend are largely not regular pastors like you and me, it doesn't always get filtered down, because it comes to the union primarily, then to the conference presidents who are busy putting out fires, but the conference president's the only one there. So it doesn't always filter down and out. So I'm saying there's a lot of good stuff, and I would encourage people. Unfortunately, it's not put out in a way that it comes to you. I think it would do good to have somebody who understands how content is consumed by the younger people, and to start putting it in a way that instead of us having to go to it, that if you sign up for it, it comes to you.
Yeah.
I like that.
To me, that's one position that they ought to invest in at that level, so that all of this great content that's there actually begins to filter down to the people who could actually use it.
Amen. Awesome. We want to thank Pastor Goodman for giving us.
Thank you for letting me. It's been great.
Yes, sir. Your expertise, your experience, sharing from the heart, and also giving us wisdom to move forward and to get involved and engage at the local level. Thank you for your time. And folks in the chat, please say thank you to Pastor Goodman. We appreciate you. And I want to throw it over to Tasha for some other announcements and for our closing.
Oh, he left us.
He left.
It's like, I'm out. But yes, thank you. I don't know if you guys heard me. My computer shut down, but I was trying to thank him for being one of those people that actually enjoys advocating on behalf of others. So, but yes, we hope you guys understand why we felt it was important to talk about this. You know, sometimes the little details of the church and stuff, we kind of push it aside sometimes, but I hope we understand now why it's important for us to at least know what's happening. We don't know all the fine details. At least we're aware of what's happening in our church and how we can be more involved. So thank you once again to Pastor Goodman. Also, of course, we want you to let us know if there are other topics you want us to talk about. As a matter of fact, within the next few weeks, we're planning a topic go round. We're just going to be talking about a whole assortment of different topics. So we need your suggestions on what some of those topics could be, like just little short questions that we can entertain for a few minutes. So let us know what you want to hear us just talk about. And also, don't forget to support the UpSet merch store. We are ready to give our next installment. We decided as a team that we're going to wait till we build a $500 queue. of money before we distribute. So we're halfway there with our next level of giving. So we need you to help push us over to that next mark so we can make sure we're blessing someone. I was trying to divvy out the money, $200, and the team was like, no, let's wait for our $500 so we can make a real impact. So
you're welcome to match it.
Yes,
anyone out there is welcome to match.
Yes,
so we can achieve the purpose.
Exactly. We want to make an impact. I let them know it's from our UpSet family. All of you are making it happen. But yes, thanks for watching. Thanks, GP, for leading us out tonight. And
no problem.
Wait, who's winning the game? Anybody want to put in?
Great job, GP.
Yeah, what's the update?
I know. Yeah, but anyway, thank you guys. We hope everyone has an awesome week. Don't forget to vote this week.
Yes, please vote. Please vote.
And we'll see you back here next Sunday, because if it's Sunday,
it's the UpSet
podcast.
Woo, I love
and
it.
probably a game day.
I was going to say, I hope
Right.
no one says game day. Okay. All right, everyone.
Phillies up. Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, okay. It's in there.
Thank you,
Eagles
Daniel.
are up now.
All
Okay.
right.
28-23.
Good
Yeah.
way to end.
All right.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.